Hello, James here, Cobra Engineering. Here we are with another Cobra Tech Talk. A little delayed on this video, but you know, life happens. So in this one we're covering the heart, the arteries, the veins, and we even give this engine CPR. Of course, I'm talking about the oil system, by far the most important part when you're building your engine and first getting it going. I got one oil cooler delete, I rebuilt one, I showed you the Cobra Engineering replacement version, and I even got a trick new little part that I'm going to come out with to help you prime this engine. Let's get right into it. Here you can see I have a fully assembled Boundary oil pump, the 3-valve version, the good one with the billet backplate. All assembled and ready to go. You could order that. Soon you'll be able to order that at Cobra Engineering website. I'm going to get all these up there. But for now, this engine came when I got it with a regular 4-valve pump marked with the HO. That's how you know. This was a Cobra pump. And this had some junk run through it, we'll say. So you get a T30. Pull all those out. I already did this. I've already cleaned this thoroughly in the parts washer. Also this with an 8mm Allen, and you're going to need a little force to get this out. Don't let this just fly. There's a spring in there. You're going to take that out. You take the spring out, and there's a piston in here. You're going to want to remove that also. It's a little tricky. There we go. Just like this. You're going to want to take all that out and clean that housing really well, everywhere. If you know you had anything going through here, make sure there's no sharp edges, nothing. So, then I like my assembly lube, just a little bit. You don't ever want anything dry. We're going to prime this engine, but still. Let me put the spring in there. Now I'm going to put a dab of red Loctite on this because we do not want this coming off. That'll make a... Well, pretty much you'll have an engine failure. Because this is what regulates your oil pressure, is this spring right here. Takes a little bit of force to get her. And no, it's not always that easy. There we go. Now I did some searching far and wide, and I couldn't find a good torque spec on this. That's a large bolt, so we're going to give it the dirty rack with the Milwaukee. That's a pretty good amount of force. Now we'll come in. We have our new gears. They have an exchange program, so I sent the gears that it looked a little rough after this one had seen some damage. Send these in, and for a reasonable amount of money, they'll exchange them for a new set. And that, of course, is the smart way to go. As you see, I just got these not too long ago, and they're coated in oil. That's a good thing. These have already been inspected. They come with an inspection sheet. I, of course, still like a little assembly lube in there, because you know me, the idea of anything being dry just drives me nuts. It's really simple. Drop that in. Of course, you can go to the Boundary website, boundarygears.com, and they have instructional videos and different things on there also. I'm just going to give a little bit here, even though that gear is pretty well oiled. We're going to install them righting up, even though that doesn't matter. We're just going to make sure that rolls around in there good. You know, it turns in there nice. Then there's this peg here, this notch here. That's simple. Really only goes one way. Now again, on all these little bolts, these are Usually with a flathead bullet, you don't need a Loctite because that tapered head will almost act like Loctite. But again, this is such a critical component. It's almost like an airplane. This is so important to the engine. There's no room for risk. Now this pump, I see, was manufactured in 2020. And on these newer ones, they don't have the screw in. It's a press in. So personally, this is entirely up to you, but before I install anything with a freeze plug like this, it looks like they peened it a little bit, but I would get in there with a punch and give it a little whack to shrink that hole in to make sure that doesn't come out. Because again, just like an airplane, you lose that component and it's all over. At least you won't crash out of the sky, but you'll feel like you wish you would have when your engine goes up in smoke. Now again, this is a T30. I'm just going to run them in. Torque of 89 inch-pounds. Got the torque wrench. Oh, missed one. Guess we're going to run one in by hand. It's alright, we don't need fancy tools to do this job. I like to zigzag across just like your wheel. Not necessarily any good rhyme or reason. And we'll go around in a circle just to make sure. Once I put my finger on the first one I started with. There we go, we have an assembled oil pump ready for service. Moves around in there nice. That you want to make sure. Nice and clean, ready to go in. Now this one, of course, the 3 valves, a little thicker body, a little thicker gear, a little more oil volume. The billet plate's a little more stable. This is basically a 2013-2014 Shelby pump with the stronger billet plate in the back. Although Boundary makes their own billet plates. But if you bought a 13 or 14 pump, they have one. It's just the Ford version. Now we'll move on. We'll get this on the engine. We're going to put the oil pump on. So what I do is I take a little alcohol. Because remember how I said brake clean leaves a little residue? Alcohol does not. And it'll clean that surface good there. I'm going to do the same thing on the oil pump. And not a lot, but just a finger, and take a little bit of RTV and run her right around there real thin. Normally from the factory it would just be metal to metal. So we're not trying to be a hero here, we just want to really make sure we keep our oil pressure in the engine. Maybe take a rag, get it on the inside there. You don't want it in the oil. We've got the oil pump here. This is a Boundary with a billet plate. And as I throw the bolts on the floor, there's these 3 bolts, these black ones. These are factory. They go in these 3 positions. But first you want to notice the flats on the crank right here, and there's 180. And there's the ears inside the pump. You can turn it. It may take a little finagling, but you'll get it turned around in there. Pretty close. You don't have to be dead nuts. Wiggle it till it seats on there. It's not seating right now, so I don't have it lined up right. Get a little more. You'll know when you got it right there. Right on. Try to get it straight on to that RTV. It sits under nice. Got one up here. One at the very top. And one down here. Now remember, I'm not torquing them down with this. Oh, that's the wrong socket. Still seem to work pretty good. We'll come back when we're done and we'll actually take the torque wrench after all these. Notice how this hole is left open. We'll move on to that right now. This is the driver's side stationary guide. Notice this bolt is much longer. It goes all the way through the oil pump and everything. And then the other one's up here in the head. And it hugs really tight to this lower side here. These are all M6. So about the same 90 Newton meters. Sorry, 90 inch-pounds, 10 Newton meters. Alright, here we have the infamous oil cooler delete. I'm sure you've all seen this. I'm lucky enough to have a few of them here. So some people, when they pull them off, they get in there with a wrench and they get these bolts out and they wiggle that in a little bit. There's no room there. So this one's all assembled. What's easier, and what you're going to want to do when you take that off, or when you want to disassemble and clean it, is back this center out. This is where the oil filter screws on. Get yourself a 1/2 inch Allen, get in there, just regular, back that out just like it's a bolt. That'll come out. You see there's an O-ring on there. And then this should just separate. It's not going to separate easily. That's okay. Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. Give yourself a chance. And the worst part is this one's already been apart once. You can see what's going on here. There's an O-ring here that seals here. That's where the coolant flows into the engine, right here. This is usually up like this on the engine. So you're going to separate these two. Now all of a sudden, bam, you can get to all the bolts super easy. That's going to be on the side of the engine. Take that off. You can see this one doesn't have the the pressure sensor. Now that you got this out, say you want to remove the cartridge. This is the cartridge. You want to remove that to clean it or replace the O-rings because maybe it's leaky. Get in there. Get in this side. Not the side with the filter, but the opposite side. And give it a little pry around like that. You can see this one I've had apart already. So it popped right out. You're going to have to put a little more force than that on there, trust me. Now this is really simple. You can see inside here, coolant flows in. These ribs are essentially a radiator, a plate style radiator system, and the oil runs through here. Actually, not through the center just goes in on the outside. And that's what cools the oil, although I would argue it heats it for emissions purposes. Now once you have this all apart, get yourself a little hook, you pop all the O-rings out, and you pick yourself up a rebuild kit. I know there's a couple different sources for them. You can see these are the O-rings I took out of this clean one. They're all smashed and they're kind of, you don't want that. Don't put that back in your engine. So I took this, I ran it through the parts washer, I cleaned the bores good with Scotch-Brite, cleaned everything, just deburred all the edges. Get in here, clean this up as best you can. Same thing here, anywhere an O-ring's going to seal. Cleaned in the grooves. Now these are all new O-rings. I sourced everything from McMaster. I'll put all the sizes and everything in the description below, so if you just want to do that, you can. Maybe I'll even throw them together in an envelope and throw it on the website. You can pick it up for a nominal cost. I got a new O-ring on that for a lack of a better term, a bolt, pass-through bolt. Got new O-rings on the cartridge. Now, of course, like all O-rings, like you've heard me say probably 100 times already, they always benefit from some kind of grease, oil. I don't care what you use, motor oil, something. Do not install O-rings dry. So I'm going to get this on here. Now the key is when I cleaned this, I literally soaked it in a little thing of gas for like 2 days and let all the junk come out. Cleaned it, did it again. There was so much black in here. If you had access to an ultrasonic cleaner, that would be ideal. I've been looking at picking one up, and this might drive me to do it, because it would have come in really handy. And I flushed this out, I can't even tell you how many times. So that one's going to stick. Now this one's going to be a little loose on, maybe on some of the rebuild kits it won't be. That's why I like to grease both sides. And then what I'm going to do is pop that in. You got to turn it a little bit. It fits basically one way. And install it this way. It's not going to go easy because it's an O-ring. In fact, I'm going to call myself out on that. And I'm going to split that one more time. And I'm going to grease the insides of the bores. You see there's a step in the bottom. This O-ring is a little smaller than the one on the bottom here. So you're going to want to make sure you get that lip really good and deburred so you don't tear the O-ring while you're installing it. Follow a little my own advice here. Make sure everything is greased nice. Try this again. It's not going to go in easy, but that's kind of the idea. You want it to seal. Turn it. Kind of clicks in when you get it right. All right. Well, I'm not going to play with that on camera. You get the idea. You're going to work that around. You're going to get that in there. And then we're going to move on. When you go to put this, do not install this yet. Remember, these bolts are going to be trapped. So what you're going to do is you are going to install this onto the engine. When you're all ready to install this on the engine, that's when you do it. Bolt that on the engine. It's going to be all set. It's going to go on there at an angle like this. This is basically going to be sticking straight out the side. Then you're going to come in and put this on after this is all torqued down onto the engine. Then you run this through. Again, grease the daylights out of that one. This little one, you want to be careful. This little one has a tendency to tear. It's so small. In fact, I noticed when I was looking at some of the rebuild kits, well, that went in there pretty good. A little bit of grease does miracles. When I was looking at some of the rebuild kits anyway, they included 2 of those in case you tore one. So it wouldn't be a good idea. You work that in a little bit. Alright, and I'll go to the engine now and I'll show you. I'll put this on there and then we'll install this. Right here, you can see the face where we're going to install the oil cooler. Now notice the pitting in here in this aluminum, and I've run this down pretty good, clean it up as best you can. There's almost always some pitting. So you'd always take a little RTV and just run just a film over it. Now I'm not going to do it on this one because we're installing that tool and we're priming this. This isn't a permanent install, but if you're on, you got this in the car and you're ready to install this, just take a thin film, just run your finger over it. You don't want it thick. Because then the gasket's going to go on there. Luckily, if he has one of these gaskets, it looks like it's outside of that. So you got to remember, we kept them separate. We didn't. This is the oil cooler. Or actually, you could argue this is the body of the oil cooler. This is the base. The reason you do this, very simple. Easy access to the bolts. So you just take a couple bolts. Nothing exotic here. Just like it looks. Of course, when installing that gasket, maybe a little film of oil on it wouldn't hurt, except when you're using that RTV, I wouldn't do that. Run that in. Now if you're installing that permanent and you're worried about torque, I would just give it a good turn with a 3/8 ratchet. But M8 bolts are typically 18 to 20 foot-pounds. So now you got this on, and you can see I already got the O-rings lubed. The O-ring on here is lubed. We're never installing O-rings dry. You know my mantra on that. That just slips on the top. You're going to want to make sure to run that in by hand. You will cross-thread it otherwise. Give it a tug. Yep, I'm in there. Grab your Allen wrench. Of course, you could use the socket one if you wanted, but this is fine. And this is what's kind of pulling all the sandwich together, so it's pretty important. I couldn't find a good torque reading on it. Well, I'm going to guess everything I got on this is probably going to be it. There we go. As you see, the hose comes in the front. Don't forget to put your sensor back in. Or, like I'm going to show you, a new part from Cobra Engineering to prime this engine. If you don't have that part, this is where you can install a hose barb. Get yourself a garden pressure tank, cut the end off, install that on there, and pump oil into the system. We're not doing that. I'm going to show you why. Here you can see Cobra Engineering's offering to replace the oil cooler, oil heater as I like to call it. Pretty simple. Plate, it bolts up just the same. Basically the same on this side. Has two ports. It's clearly labeled in and out for oil. This is where oil goes in, where it comes out. You run a remote filter. And I don't make a filter at this time because it just isn't worth it. There's so many on the market and they're all basically the same. This comes with one plug in case you don't use, because most people won't use the out. You'll just have the pressure sensor on the in. I recommend putting it on the inside closest to the engine. It'll come with a fitting. This is an 1.5 inch hose barb, but you can get 16-20, 1 3/4, and 1.5 inches. The lower radiator hose is 1 3/4. The factory is 1.5 inches. So you're going to kind of have to figure out what you want to do there. And as you see, there's two different versions. There's a larger opening, a smaller opening. Notice there's a lot of misnomers. People think the orange or the blue gasket determines the size. This is a Felpro, it's blue. This is a Ford, it's blue. This one's small, this one's large. Put them close together, you can see the difference. The real key is to look where this hole, see how that gasket comes straight out from there. The same on the opening. That's the smaller one. Now notice straight out from this hole on the Ford one or the Felpro will be the same on the larger gasket. That's over more. There's more opening there. You can see it when they're side by side. Same thing here. So if I put the larger one on the smaller opening, you can see quite a bit more space there. That's how you tell. Generally speaking, earlier blocks all have smaller openings. Iron blocks have smaller openings. But 0304 Cobra iron blocks can take the larger one. It will seal. The mating face is there. You could open it up, but it only has the small opening. Now the newer anemic blocks have the larger opening. These are just kind of generalities. You need to check your gasket and your oil cooler to see what you have. Here you can see texted block. As far as I know, I've never heard of an exception. All texted blocks are the smaller opening. It's a good general rule if you're just in question. Order the smaller one. It'll almost always seal. It'll even seal with the larger gasket. I don't make this outside any different. Comes with the hardware. Comes with the one fitting. Will not come with these ORB fittings. You're going to have to supply these. These are -10. Yes, I've tried to fit 12 in there, but it's just too tight. It's not practical. This is plenty of flow for any oil pump internal in the engine. Right here I got the engine upside down. We're going to install the pickup tube and we're going to check for the pickup to pan height. Notice I don't have the O-ring on yet. That's not critical yet. I'm going to avoid squishing that as many times as I can. Got a brand new one with the gasket. Really, I'm just putting one bolt in there for now. We're just going to see where we're starting from. Same thing here. Taller riser goes. Oh, don't get a little cockeyed in there. Good enough. I need the pan gasket. Oh, upside down. I do that. Come in. Here's the secret. Piece of cellophane. Just go in the kitchen, get some saran wrap. I happen to have this plastic from something I unwrapped. Then, go to the dollar store, steal it from your kids. Whatever you gotta do, get a little Play-Doh, less than $1 usually. Take a chunk of that off. Get a little more than that. Can't really have too much, but you don't want a big old mess either. Make like a disc out of it. You're gonna want to cover the whole area. And you're gonna fold that over. Nice and loose on there, nothing critical. Oh, don't get it in the gasket. And it's pretty simple while you're putting the gasket there. That's the final installed height. And you're just going to slowly set that on where it belongs. Line it up with the holes. I don't even think I felt that squished down, to be honest. So I don't even know. Push down on it. Usually you install 2 bolts here, but I didn't even feel it. So I'm going to take that off. Now it did squish. We're going to see where our starting point is. So like I have an old scrap of aluminum laying around. A nice long razor. I'll set that right here. Separate that. And you can see where the circle from this is. That's the height you care about. So what I'm doing is I'm just cutting her down the middle. Yeah, you're squishing it a little bit, but you'll get it. Now you can see the sectional height. That's what you want to measure. That's the distance between this lip and the bottom of the pan. Let's get out your cheap calipers. And I've got 433, 400. I like a goal of about 350. Don't throw that Play-Doh away. You're going to keep that in the garage forever. So I knew that didn't squish much when I pushed it down. So, you can see right here, our goal is to split this up. Bring this up about 100 thou maybe. Get that around 350-ish. I have different washers. This one's 100, and I got some thinner ones. That's 60. We're going to start with the 100. Very simply put, I'm just going to place that between this. Boy, this could be bent over a little. There we go. Don't be afraid to bend that around a little. Make sure you got plenty of thread engagement still. If that bolt's too short, you're going to have to get a longer bolt. Run that down. And repeat. We'll get a little more Play-Doh on there. I'll put the whole ball on there, why not? The last one didn't squish much. Don't forget that plastic. You get that Play-Doh in that screen and you're going to have a real bad day. No, don't bump it. There we go. Well, I can feel it squishing now. Push that down. I didn't grab a couple bolts. I'll get a couple shoulder ones from here. Oh my. These are a little different heads. Obviously just run one down on each side and cross them over if you'd like. The structure of the pan will do the job. And you're just taking them out. Going back and forth until you got it. You can really tell I squished that one this time. Get my plate. You can see the section, that cross section right there. $289, $262. I'm going to say that's a little too much. I really don't want to be below 300. So, back to the drawing board. Remember that washer was 100. Another one is 60, so they'll take that'll probably put us right in the ballpark. Little thinner washer. Now when I'm done, that bolt and these two up here, after you put the O-ring on, don't forget the O-ring on there. Going to get a little red Loctite on it. It's just not good if that lets go. Now, when I set this pickup height with this pan is going to ship with this engine. In my opinion, this should be set from anyone who assembles an engine. And that pan should stay with that engine. yes, the pans are different. I have actually seen where engine failure, because it's a stock pan, it's a pan, it shouldn't matter. And guess what? It matters. One was dented a little bit, maybe a little road rash there, something you couldn't even see. I shrunk that pickup height, killed the bearings all over. This pan and this gasket's going to go on when I'm done here. And it's shipping with it. And it's going in the car that way. Alright, let's see what we got here. .303. 314. I might even get picky and check the crossway. That one's about 320. Looking better yet. I like to try to get it pretty level across. It doesn't have to be really perfect. Same thing there, about 310. Obviously, you're just measuring Play-Doh, so it's not super rocket science. But I got at least 300 pickup height. That's a good height. Now I'm going to come back. Like I said, I like that washer height. And we're going to install this. The O-ring, the new O-ring came with the gasket. So roll that old one out, it's going to be squished. Little WD on there. That don't hurt there either. I probably didn't want that in the bolt hole. Just goes around here. Obviously this pickup was thoroughly cleaned. I don't care if it was new. You still clean it. I work in a factory and we send parts out clean. I wouldn't trust anyone at my factory either. And I love them guys. This is your engine. You're responsible for it. This side, you don't need a ton, just a little bit. We are not having this come apart. So I'll save it a headache. Basically I'm installing this, and then even though everything's identical, I'm still going to check it after a final install one last time. It's probably the most important thing. It's definitely one of the reasons I see a lot of failures. I'm going to torque them down. Usual M6 bolt, 90 inch-pounds. Here I'm excited to announce we're going to use this to prime the engine. This is a new part I made literally just 2 weeks ago. And we're going to try it out right on this engine. There's one O-ring, goes in the back. It's real simple. You're going to buy this, it's going to be cheap. It'll have this 4 fitting in there. You're going to run to your hardware store and you're going to pick up a regular old pressure bug sprayer. Lop the nozzle end off. That's just a bare hose. Take that bare hose, we're going to stick that on the engine. Pump that up and we're going to pressurize the oil system and prime the whole system. The thing about this is, then I'm going to take a little plug, 1/8 inch plug, put that in that hole. I'm going to leave this bolted on the engine, ship that engine like that. That engine's going to ship with all the oil in all the passages, and it's not going to come back out because it's going to be sealed. I'm going to try to make this as inexpensive as possible because I feel everyone should have this. These are cheap. You get this on Amazon, probably 10 bucks. I don't even know. You can see for years I've been using it. I got various different fittings for different factory oil coolers, and where you get them in the ports where the sensor goes. This is just going to simplify it. You can see that's all it is. It just goes on that one spot. Look on the website, cobraengineering.com. That should be on there soon. All right, here you see, got our new part. Just gonna bolt this right down here where the oil cooler would go. Like I said, once I bolt this up, this is not coming off. I am gonna ship this engine just like this. I'll take that nipple out. I'll put that 1/8 inch NPT plug in there. Now I'm going to prime this, whatever break-in oil you want to use. And I'm not going to tell you what to use because everybody's got their preference. Any arguments that it really don't matter. Snug that down. I remember I cut the wand right off of this garden sprayer. Just a pesticide sprayer or whatever. I don't even know. Work that on there. It should be on there pretty tight. If it's not tight, get a hose clamp. Wrap a wire around there. Do something to clamp that, just like you would your boost line. And I'm just going to pump this up. Start pumping some oil in there. Now what I'm looking for is I want to see the tensioner's oil. There's little oil leak holes on these. It's going to take a little bit. I want to eventually see oil coming out all the way up here in the lifters, all the way to the back. You want to make sure this plugs in the head in the back, up here. I don't know if you guys ever dealt with that. I've had that not be there. Everything along here, you want to see oil. So I'm just going to pump until I see some come out somewhere, and then I'm going to turn the engine. That's why I got the breaker bar on there. Well, there's definitely some pressure. Got to be going. It just takes a little more than you want. Oh, yeah, come on. I'm just going to give it a turn. Oh, see there. Right up here, there's a little bleeder on that. This one doesn't have any yet. Keep her going. Can't have too much oil in your engine. Alright, see now this one's dripping over here. That's why you gotta have a drip pan on the bottom here. Oh yeah, this tensioner's going good. Alright, we had some technical difficulties with the camera there. From back here you can see it's running good out of these tensioners. I got a pan down here now. It's coming out the secondary tensioner on the top here. And this one's leaking. You can barely tell, but that one's... I'm going down and I'm looking. You can see all the lifter holes in the rockers, or the followers. You can see they have a little bit of oil coming out of them. This one's got pretty good flow on this side. Everything's looking good. If we can depressurize the canister now. You hear that? Everything looks good. Now that engine's primed, you can always, I'll put a plug in here when I ship it. You can put that nipple back in and reprime it again when it's installed in the car, just to make sure. Almost guaranteed to fire up nice. Well, there we go. Finally buttoned this engine up. That oil pan's not coming off. That's going in the car. Of course, I'm going to put the rear cover on. I'm going to let this drip overnight into my tray and on the floor. And then I'm going to wrap this up in plastic, crate it up, and get it out west. Like I said, I'll follow up on a video when he gets that car going. I think it's going to be fun. He's got a 3-liter Whipple going on here. It's just going to be a good, solid street car. Thanks for watching. Of course, subscribe. Please like the video. Stick around. I'm going to have more. I'm not sure what's next, but I got a lot of requests. Everything from crank video, the crank support, the stud in the crank. We're going to cover that. We may even get to some shows, show you some other cars, other Cobras, if I can ever get the snow off the ground. Thanks a lot, and I hope to see you soon.